Dr. Min-seo had seen many strange things in her 20 years as a xenobiologist, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. She stood behind the reinforced glass wall of the UN's most secure facility, watching history unfold before her eyes. The containment chamber hummed with energy as alien technology activated, and suddenly, where empty space had been just seconds before, a figure began to take shape. The materialization process was unlike anything human science had achieved. Light seemed to bend and twist, particles of matter assembling themselves from nothing until Ambassador Vextar of the Galactic Collective stood complete in the sterile white room. Min-seo had expected something truly alien, perhaps tentacles, or multiple heads, but what she saw was surprisingly familiar, yet deeply unsettling. The ambassador looked almost human, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a recognizable face, but something was fundamentally wrong with how it moved. Vextar's movements were too smooth, too fluid, as if its joints worked on entirely different principles than human anatomy. When it turned its head, the motion was continuous and unbroken, lacking the small jerky adjustments that made human movement natural. Its skin had a strange translucent quality, and veins of pale blue light pulsed beneath the surface in patterns. That hurt to follow with the naked eye. But what truly disturbed Min-seo was the expression in the ambassador's large, dark eyes. She had expected curiosity, perhaps caution or even mild fear. Instead, she saw something that made her stomach clench with unease. The alien was terrified. Not nervous or worried, but genuinely, deeply afraid. Its eyes darted around the chamber, taking in every detail of the human delegation visible through the observation windows, and with each passing moment, that fear seemed to grow stronger. The diplomatic protocols had been established months in advance through long-range communications. The Galactic Collective, a union of thousands of intelligent species spanning multiple star systems, had finally decided to make formal contact with humanity. It should have been the greatest moment in human history, the dawn of a new age of interstellar cooperation and knowledge sharing. Instead, the entire process felt wrong from the very beginning. The collective's initial message had been frustratingly vague about the meeting conditions. They insisted that all diplomatic encounters must take place aboard their vessels in Earth's orbit. Under no circumstances would any alien representative set foot on Earth's surface. When human negotiators pressed for explanations, the responses became even more cryptic. The aliens spoke of Earth as the homeworld and claimed it carries too much risk for their kind to visit directly. Human scientists had spent weeks theorizing about what this might mean. Perhaps Earth's gravity was too strong for their fragile bodies, or maybe our atmosphere contained elements toxic to their biology. Some suggested that Earth's magnetic field or radiation levels posed dangers to alien physiology. Dr. Min-seo herself had written several papers hypothesizing about potential biological incompatibilities that might make direct contact dangerous. Now, watching Ambassador Vextar's reaction to simply being in an Earth-based facility, even one with completely controlled atmosphere and environment, Min-seo realized that their theories had been hopelessly naive. This wasn't about biological incompatibility or environmental hazards. The fear in the ambassador's eyes was primal, instinctive, the kind of terror that came from recognizing a natural predator. The cultural exchange began according to carefully planned protocols. Min-seo activated the holographic display systems, ready to share carefully selected footage that would give the aliens insight into human civilization. She had chosen what seemed like the most innocent and positive aspects of human life, hoping to make a good first impression and establish trust between the species. The first video showed human children playing in a park. Laughing kids chased each other across grass, climbed on playground equipment, and engaged in games of tag and hide-and-seek. To human eyes, it was the picture of innocence and joy. Ambassador Vextar watched in complete silence, but Min-seo could see the alien's breathing apparatus working faster, processing air at an accelerated rate that suggested extreme stress. The next segment featured human athletes competing in various sports, runners pushing their bodies to incredible speeds, swimmers moving through water with powerful strokes, gymnasts performing feats that seemed to defy gravity. Again, what seemed like a celebration of human achievement and physical capability, appeared to horrify the alien observer. Vextar's hands, if they could be called hands, trembled slightly as it watched humans casually performing physical acts that were apparently beyond the ambassador's comprehension. When Mincio moved on to discuss human history and culture, she made what seemed like an innocent comment about humanity's past conflicts and wars, intending to acknowledge human flaws while emphasizing how far civilization had progressed. The effect on Ambassador Vextar was immediate and dramatic. The alien went completely rigid, its strange fluid movement stopping entirely as if it had been frozen in place. The silence stretched uncomfortably long before Vextar finally spoke, its voice transmitted through translation devices that gave the words an eerie artificial quality. "You speak of this as if it were normal," the ambassador whispered, and there was no mistaking the horror in its tone. The way it said normal made it clear that whatever humans considered routine aspects of their existence were anything but normal to the rest of the galaxy. Mincio felt a chill run down her spine as she began to understand that this first contact was revealing something far more significant and disturbing than anyone had anticipated. The fear in Ambassador Vextar's eyes wasn't about biological incompatibility or environmental dangers. It was about humanity itself. Lieutenant, Commander Hyunwoo had learned to trust his instincts during 15 years of military service, and right now every instinct was screaming that something was wrong. As the diplomatic security chief for humanity's first contact mission, he was responsible for ensuring these meetings went smoothly, but the alien delegation's behavior was setting off alarm bells in his mind. It started with small things that most people might have missed. During the second day of negotiations, Dr. Mincio casually mentioned how human mountain climbers had conquered Mount Everest, despite the deadly conditions. The moment she said it, every alien in the room went completely silent. Not the polite quiet of people listening carefully, but the frozen silence of prey animals sensing danger. Ambassador Vextar's translator device made small clicking sounds as if struggling to process the information, and when it finally responded, the alien simply said they should move to a different topic. Hyunwoo started paying closer attention after that. When a human negotiator told a story about Arctic researchers surviving in negative 40-degree temperatures for months, the aliens shifted uncomfortably in their specially designed chairs. When someone mentioned deep-sea exploration, at crushing depths where sunlight never reached, Ambassador Vextar actually flinched. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Anything related to human survival in extreme conditions caused visible distress among the alien delegation. The breaking point came during a discussion about space colonization. Hyunwoo had been explaining humanity's plans to establish permanent settlements on Mars, describing how humans would adapt to the harsh environment, survive radiation exposure, and build thriving communities in conditions that would kill most Earth life. As he spoke, he watched the aliens exchange glances that he could only describe as terrified. Their body language screamed of creatures who wanted to flee, but were trapped by diplomatic protocol. That night, Hyunwoo made a decision that would change everything. Using his diplomatic access codes, he began exploring the Galactic Collective's database systems. The aliens had granted limited access to their information networks as part of the cultural exchange, but Hyunwoo suspected there was much more hidden beneath the surface. His military training had taught him how to recognize when people were hiding something important, and the alien delegation was definitely hiding something. The first level of access contained exactly what he expected: basic information about collective member species, their homeworlds, cultural practices, and technological achievements. It was fascinating but unremarkable, the kind of general knowledge that any diplomatic mission would share freely. But Hyunwoo had learned long ago that the most important information was always kept in the restricted sections. Using techniques he had picked up during intelligence operations, Hyunwoo began probing deeper into the database structure. What he found made his blood run cold. Hidden behind multiple layers of security protocols were files with classifications he had never seen before. Categories marked with symbols that his translation software struggled to interpret, but which seemed to translate roughly as Death World, Protocols, and Apex Predator classifications. The existence of such categories was disturbing enough, But what really shocked Hyunwoo was where humanity was listed. Earth and its people were not included in the standard member species database. Instead, they were filed in a heavily restricted section alongside entries labeled "The Last Survivors," those who should not be awakened, and most chillingly, species requiring immediate containment. Hyunwoo's hands shook as he accessed these files. Each entry told the story of a species that had once existed somewhere in the galaxy, beings who had evolved on worlds that the collective classified as death worlds. The descriptions were clinical, but terrifying. These were species that had developed intelligence while retaining the physical and psychological traits of natural predators. They could survive in environments that would instantly kill other intelligent life forms. They could adapt to new challenges with frightening speed. Most disturbing of all, they treated extinction-level threats as problems to be solved rather than reasons to surrender. Every single entry ended the same way. The species had either gone extinct through some catastrophic event, or their evolution had produced beings so dangerous that they posed a threat to galactic civilization itself. Some files contained fragmented records of conflicts that had raged for millions of years. Others described worlds that had been deliberately sterilized to prevent the spread of species deemed too dangerous to coexist with the rest of the galaxy. The deeper Hyunwoo dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. It seemed that throughout galactic history, worlds similar to Earth had occasionally produced intelligent life. These death world species shared common characteristics: incredible physical resilience, rapid adaptation abilities, problem-solving, skills that bordered on the supernatural, and most importantly, an absolute refusal to accept defeat even in the face of impossible odds. The files referenced something called the Terran precedent repeatedly, as if Earth's situation was not unique, but part of a pattern that had played out before. The references were frustratingly vague, but they painted a picture of previous Deathworld species that had achieved spaceflight and made contact with galactic civilization. The outcomes had apparently been catastrophic enough that the collective had developed extensive protocols for dealing with such species. Hyunwoo found documentation of containment procedures, monitoring systems, and contingency plans that made his military mind reel. The collective had apparently been preparing for humanity's emergence into space for decades, if not centuries. They had weapons specifically designed to neutralize Deathworld species, strategies for limiting their expansion, and protocols for what they euphemistically called final solutions if containment failed. The most chilling discovery was a file labeled HFY War Archives. The contents were heavily encrypted, but the fragments Hyunwoo could access painted a picture of a conflict so devastating that it had nearly destroyed galactic civilization itself. The war had been fought against a species remarkably similar to humanity, beings who had evolved on a harsh world and developed the same impossible combination of intelligence and survival instinct that characterized humans. As Hyunwoo sat in the darkness of his quarters, staring at the evidence spread across his screen, he realized that humanity's first contact was not the beginning of a new age of cooperation. It was the opening move in a chess game that had been played before, with rules written in the blood of extinct civilizations. The alien delegation's fear was not xenophobia or misunderstanding. It was the rational terror of beings who knew exactly what humanity represented and what had happened the last time the galaxy had encountered their kind. Dr. Ji-won had always been fascinated by the diversity of life on Earth. As an evolutionary biologist, she understood how millions of years of harsh competition had shaped every living creature on the planet. But nothing in her years of study had prepared her for what she discovered when she began comparing human physiology to that of their alien visitors. The comparative analysis started as routine scientific curiosity. Ji-won wanted to understand the basic biological differences between humans and the galactic collective species, partly for medical safety reasons and partly to satisfy her scientific mind. She had expected some differences in bone density, muscle structure, and organ function, but what she found was so extreme that she initially thought her equipment was malfunctioning. The first shock came when she analyzed bone samples that Ambassador Vexitar had voluntarily provided for the study. Under her microscope, the alien bone structure looked almost crystalline, beautiful but incredibly delicate. When she ran standard pressure tests, the results were staggering. The alien bones began to crack under pressure that wouldn't even register as discomfort to a human child. A gentle handshake that humans considered polite would literally shatter an alien's finger bones. Ji-won ran the tests multiple times, certain she had made an error. She compared the alien bone density to that of Earth's most fragile creatures, but even baby birds had stronger skeletal structures. It was as if the aliens had evolved in an environment so gentle that their bodies never needed to develop any real structural strength. The muscle tissue analysis revealed even more disturbing differences. Human muscle fibers were dense, powerful, and designed for both explosive action and sustained effort. The alien muscle samples looked more like delicate silk threads under magnification. They were clearly designed for fine motor control and precision movement. But they had virtually no capacity for generating force or withstanding stress. When Ji-won tested their reaction speed, the results were equally shocking. She used simple stimulus response tests that any human could complete without thinking. Flash a light, measure how quickly the subject responds. The fastest human reaction times were measured in fractions of a second. The aliens took nearly 10 times longer to respond to the same stimuli. What seemed like lightning-fast reflexes to them would be considered dangerously slow by human standards. But the most disturbing discovery came when Ji-won examined their healing capabilities. She had requested tissue samples from aliens who had suffered minor injuries during their journey to Earth. What she found defied everything she knew about biological systems. The alien tissue showed virtually no signs of repair or regeneration. Cuts that would heal completely in humans within days remained as permanent scars in alien physiology. Broken bones didn't mend properly, leaving the aliens permanently weakened. Ji-won spent sleepless nights reviewing her data, trying to understand how such fragile beings had managed to develop advanced technology and space travel. The answer gradually became clear as she studied their evolutionary history. These aliens had never needed to be strong, fast, or resilient because their worlds had never demanded it of them. When she finally presented her findings to the diplomatic team, the room fell silent. The implications were staggering. Humans weren't just different from the aliens. They were built like living weapons compared to the delicate structures of galactic civilization. Every human in the room suddenly felt like a giant surrounded by creatures made of glass. Ambassador Vexstar had been unusually quiet during the presentation, but as Ji-won finished explaining her conclusions, something in the aliens' demeanor changed. The careful diplomatic composure that had characterized all their interactions finally cracked, revealing something raw and honest underneath. The ambassador's voice, transmitted through the translation device, carried a weight of emotion that the technology struggled to convey. Dr. Ji-won, Vexstar began, your findings confirm what we have long suspected, but hoped was not true. You have discovered why your species terrifies us on a level that transcends rational thought. Vexstar stood and moved to the center of the room with that unsettling fluid motion that characterized all the aliens. Most sapient species in the galaxy evolved on worlds we call garden worlds, places with gentle gravity, stable weather patterns, abundant food sources, and few natural predators. Our evolutionary path was one of comfort and plenty. We developed large brains because thinking was more useful than fighting. We created tools because manipulation was more effective than brute force. The ambassador paused, seeming to gather strength for what came next. Our worlds were so kind to us that we never needed to become strong, fast, or resilient. We never developed the ability to heal quickly from injuries because serious injuries were rare. We never needed lightning reflexes because there were no predators fast enough to threaten us. We never built powerful muscles because there was nothing heavy to lift or fight against. Ji-won felt a chill as she began to understand the full implications of what Vexstar was explaining. Earth hadn't been a garden world. It had been a constant battlefield where only the strongest, fastest, and most adaptable creatures survived. Humans had developed intelligence not as an alternative to physical prowess, but in addition to it. Your planet, Vexstar continued, was what we classify as a death world. A place so hostile that survival required not just intelligence, but incredible physical capabilities, lightning-fast reflexes, and the ability to heal from injuries that would permanently disable or kill any member of our species. You developed these traits over millions of years of the most brutal evolutionary pressure imaginable. The alien's next words sent shivers through everyone present. Your people are what we call impossibles, beings who should not exist according to our understanding of how intelligence evolves. You are brilliant enough to build starships and develop advanced technology, yet you retain all the physical and psychological traits of apex predators. You can think your way through complex problems, but you can also survive being thrown through a window, heal from injuries that would kill us, and react to threats faster than our minds can even process them. Vexitar moved closer to the human delegation, and G1 could see something that might have been awe mixed with terror in the alien's large eyes. Every single human in this room is, by our standards, a super being. Your children could accidentally kill our strongest adults. Your elderly could outrun our fastest athletes. Your most peaceful philosophers have more capacity for violence than our greatest warriors. The weight of this revelation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. G1 realized that the diplomatic mission had uncovered something far more significant than cultural differences or technological gaps. They had discovered that humanity represented something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had achieved intelligence while retaining all the savage efficiency that had allowed them to survive on one of the universe's most hostile worlds. As she looked around the room at her colleagues, G1 saw them with new eyes. These weren't just diplomats and scientists trying to make contact with alien civilization. They were the descendants of the most successful predators in Earth's history, being so perfectly adapted for survival that their very existence challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about how intelligent life should develop. Admiral So Young had spent her entire career preparing for the unknown, but nothing in her military experience had equipped her to handle what Lieutenant Commander Hyunwoo had discovered in those restricted files. As the head of humanity's first diplomatic mission to an alien civilization, she had expected challenges, cultural misunderstandings, and complex negotiations. She had not expected to learn that humanity might be walking into a trap that had been set millions of years before their species even existed. The morning after Hyunwoo's briefing, So Young made a decision that would change the course of human history. She walked into the diplomatic chamber where Ambassador Vexitar and the alien delegation were waiting for another day of carefully scripted cultural exchanges, and she abandoned all pretense of polite negotiation. "We need to talk," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "My people have discovered your restricted files about Death World species and something called the Terran Precedent. I want complete access to your historical archives, and I want it now." The reaction from the alien delegation was immediate and dramatic. Several of the smaller aliens actually recoiled in their seats while Ambassador Vexitar went completely still, in that unnatural way that had become disturbingly familiar. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute before the ambassador finally responded. "Admiral So Young," Vexitar said, its voice carrying a weight of resignation that the translation software struggled to convey. "We had hoped to approach this revelation more gradually. The complete truth is difficult for both our species to accept." "I don't care how difficult it is," So Young replied firmly. "My job is to protect humanity's interests, and I can't do that if I'm operating on incomplete information. You're clearly afraid of us for reasons that go far deeper than cultural differences or biological incompatibility. I need to know why." The next several hours were a nightmare of bureaucratic procedures, as the collective's command structure debated whether to grant the humans access to their most classified historical records. So Young waited with growing impatience, knowing that every moment of delay meant her people were making decisions based on dangerously incomplete information. Finally, as the artificial day cycle dimmed in the diplomatic chamber, Ambassador Vexitar returned with authorization to access the collective's deepest archives. What they revealed rewrote everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. The files began with astronomical data from 67 million years ago, dates that made So Young's head spin as she tried to comprehend the vast scope of galactic history. At that time, when Earth was still dominated by dinosaurs, Another world on the far side of the galaxy had produced intelligent life. The planet was classified as a death world, with crushing gravity, extreme weather patterns, and ecosystems so hostile that survival required constant adaptation and evolution. The species that emerged from this brutal environment called themselves the hegemony, and the similarities to humanity were terrifying. They were bipedal, roughly humanoid in appearance, and possessed the same impossible combination of intelligence and physical prowess that characterized humans. Like humans, they had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of tracking prey across vast distances and adapting to any environment. Like humans, they treated seemingly impossible challenges as problems to be solved, rather than obstacles to surrender to. When the hegemony first achieved spaceflight and made contact with galactic civilization, the response was overwhelmingly positive. The galaxy had never encountered a species quite like them, beings who could survive in environments that would instantly kill any other intelligent life form. They could establish colonies on worlds that other species considered uninhabitable. They could solve engineering problems that had stumped galactic civilization for millennia. They could adapt their technology and tactics to overcome challenges that would have destroyed entire civilizations. For several thousand years, the hegemony were celebrated as the galaxy's greatest success story. They became explorers, problem solvers, and guardians of galactic civilization. When dangerous situations arose that were too risky for other species to handle, the hegemony stepped forward without hesitation. They colonized hostile worlds, defeated spaceborne threats, and pushed the boundaries of what galactic civilization thought was possible. But gradually, the galaxy began to realize that the same traits that made the hegemony such valuable allies also made them fundamentally incompatible with the peaceful coexistence that other species preferred. The hegemony's expansion was relentless and rapid. They didn't slowly colonize worlds after careful planning like other species. They spread across star systems like a controlled wildfire, adapting and thriving wherever they landed. Their solutions to problems often involved what they called controlled violence, precisely applied force that achieved objectives quickly and efficiently. What seemed like elegant problem-solving to the hegemony appeared as terrifying brutality to species that had evolved in peaceful environments. When faced with resource shortages, the hegemony didn't negotiate or compromise. They found ways to take what they needed while ensuring their own survival. The breaking point came when territorial disputes arose between the hegemony and several established galactic civilizations. Other species approached such conflicts through careful negotiation, compromise, and gradual resolution that could take centuries to complete. The hegemony adapted, evolved their strategies, and treated each diplomatic setback as a challenge to overcome through superior tactics and relentless pressure. What followed was not a war in any sense that other galactic species understood. It was an evolutionary arms race where one side adapted and improved with each challenge, while the other side struggled to comprehend opponents who treated defeat as temporary setbacks rather than final outcomes. The hegemony didn't just fight. They learned from every engagement, modified their approaches, and came back stronger than before. The conflict lasted 3 million years, a span of time so vast that entire civilizations rose and fell during its course. Generation after generation of galactic species threw everything they had against an enemy that seemed to grow more dangerous with each passing millennium. The hegemony never sought to destroy galactic civilization entirely. They simply wanted to expand and thrive according to their nature, but their nature was so fundamentally aggressive and adaptive that coexistence became impossible. The war finally ended not through military victory, but through an act of desperation so extreme that it nearly destroyed galactic civilization itself. The surviving species collaborated on a weapon of unimaginable power, something that could sterilize entire star systems simultaneously. In a coordinated strike that required the combined resources of thousands of worlds, they unleashed this weapon against every planet the hegemony had ever touched. The sterilization was complete and instantaneous. Every hegemony world, every colony, every outpost was reduced to lifeless rock in a matter of hours. The species that had once seemed indestructible was wiped from existence so thoroughly that only these classified records remained as evidence they had ever existed. But the victory came at a cost that nearly broke galactic civilization. The resources required to build and deploy the sterilization weapon had bankrupted entire star systems. The moral trauma of committing genocide on such a massive scale left deep psychological scars that persisted for millions of years. Entire species withdrew from galactic society, unable to cope with what they had done. In the aftermath, the survivors made a solemn vow that would shape galactic policy for the next 67 million years. Never again would they allow a death world species to achieve spaceflight. The galaxy would monitor such worlds carefully, and if intelligent life began to develop, they would intervene before it could pose a threat to galactic civilization. As Admiral So Young absorbed this revelation, she understood with crystal clarity why the alien delegation had been so terrified. Humanity wasn't just another species seeking to join galactic civilization. They were the second coming of the galaxy's greatest nightmare, and everyone in the room knew how the first encounter had ended. The silence in the diplomatic chamber was deafening after Ambassador Vextar finished explaining the hegemony war. Admiral So Young sat motionless, processing the magnitude of what they had learned, while Dr. Minseo stared at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. Lieutenant Commander Hyunwoo had gone pale, understanding immediately what this revelation meant for humanity's future. The weight of 67 million years of galactic history pressed down on everyone present. Dr. Minseo was the first to break the silence. So every time we've shared information about human achievements, every story about survival and adaptation, every example of human resilience, you've been comparing us to the species that nearly destroyed galactic civilization. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor beneath it that revealed how deeply this knowledge had shaken her. Ambassador Vextar's response came slowly, as if each word required careful consideration. Yes, Dr. Minseo. Every interaction has confirmed our worst fears. When you showed us footage of human children playing, we saw young predators learning to hunt. When you described mountain climbers conquering impossible peaks, we saw beings who refused to accept natural limits. When you mentioned human expansion into hostile environments, we saw the same relentless drive that characterized the hegemony's expansion across the galaxy. The alien delegation had been unusually quiet throughout the revelation, but now Vextar gestured to them with one fluid motion. My colleagues have been arguing among themselves since we arrived. Some believe humanity might be different, that your species could learn to coexist peacefully with galactic civilization. Others believe that the pattern is too strong, too deeply ingrained in your evolutionary development to be changed. Admiral So Young leaned forward, her military training taking over as she assessed the tactical situation. And what do you believe, Ambassador? Vextar was quiet for a long moment, and when it finally spoke, there was something that might have been sadness in its voice. I believe that you are exactly what we feared you would be, but I also believe that you are exactly what the galaxy needs, if we can find a way to coexist. The paradox was maddening. Dr. Minseo had spent her career studying evolution and adaptation, but she had never considered how those same processes that had allowed humanity to thrive on Earth might make them incompatible with peaceful galactic society. The traits that had saved humanity from extinction, the relentless drive to survive and adapt, the refusal to accept defeat, the ability to find solutions where others saw only impossible problems, these same characteristics had turned the hegemony into a threat so dangerous that the galaxy had chosen genocide over coexistence. But there was another side to the equation that kept nagging at her scientific mind. Ambassador, she said carefully, you mentioned that some of your colleagues believe humanity might be different. What would make us different from the hegemony? Vextar shifted in its chair, the motion creating those unsettling ripples of light beneath its translucent skin. The hegemony never knew what they were. They achieved spaceflight and encountered galactic civilization without understanding how their nature would be perceived. They made decisions based on their own cultural context, never realizing that their solutions terrified other species. You, however, now know the truth. You understand what you represent to the galaxy. The implications were staggering. Humanity, was being given a choice that the hegemony had never had, the opportunity to consciously decide what kind of galactic citizens they would become. They could choose to temper their nature, to find ways to use their unique abilities that wouldn't trigger the same fears that had led to the hegemony war. But as Dr. Min Seo thought about it, she realized that the choice might not be as simple as it appeared. The traits that made humans dangerous to galactic civilization were the same traits that had allowed them to survive Earth's harsh evolutionary pressures. Could humanity change its fundamental nature without losing what made them human in the first place? Admiral So Young's voice cut through her thoughts. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador? Vextar's response came with the formal tone of someone delivering an official statement. The Galactic Collective is prepared to offer humanity membership under specific conditions designed to ensure galactic stability. These conditions would include strict limitations on human expansion beyond your solar system, continuous monitoring of human activities to prevent the development of technologies that could threaten galactic civilization, and voluntary genetic modification programs to reduce human physical capabilities to levels compatible with galactic norms. The words hit the human delegation like physical blows. Lieutenant Commander Hyun Woo's military background made him immediately recognize the proposal for what it really was, a carefully worded ultimatum. Join the collective as a contained and monitored species, or face the same fate as the hegemony. Dr. Min Seo felt her scientific mind reeling at the implications of the genetic modification requirement. They were asking humanity to voluntarily surrender the evolutionary advantages that had taken millions of years to develop, to become weaker, slower, less adaptable, less resilient, to become more like the rest of galactic civilization by giving up what made them human. And if we refuse these conditions? Admiral So Young asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Vexatar's response was delivered with what seemed like genuine regret. Then the collective will implement the same protocols that were used to end the hegemony war. Your species will be prevented from expanding beyond Earth through any means necessary. The threat was delivered with diplomatic language, but its meaning was unmistakable. Accept containment and modification, or face extinction. The galaxy had made this choice once before, and they were prepared to make it again if necessary. But, as the human delegation sat in stunned silence, Dr. Min Seo began to see a third option that neither side had considered. What if humanity's nature didn't have to be a threat to galactic civilization? What if the same traits that had made the hegemony dangerous could be channeled into something beneficial? Ambassador, she said slowly, the galaxy survived the hegemony war, but at what cost? How many species were lost? How many worlds were destroyed? How much knowledge and culture was sacrificed to achieve victory? Vexatar's response confirmed her suspicions. The cost was catastrophic. We estimate that galactic civilization was set back by millions of years. Entire species went extinct, not from war but from the resources required to fight it. Countless worlds were abandoned when their populations couldn't bear the moral weight of what they had done. Dr. Min Seo leaned forward, her scientific training pushing her toward a hypothesis that might save both species. Then maybe the question isn't whether humanity can be contained or modified to fit galactic norms. Maybe the question is whether humanity can help the galaxy become stronger, more resilient, better prepared for the challenges that the universe will inevitably throw at it. The idea hung in the air like a challenge to everything both sides had assumed about the situation. Humanity didn't have to be a threat to galactic civilization. They could be its greatest asset if both sides could find the courage to try something that had never been attempted before. But as Admiral So Young looked around the chamber, she knew that courage might be the one thing in short supply. The galaxy had been traumatized by its encounter with the hegemony, and trauma made people choose safety over opportunity. Humanity, meanwhile, was just beginning to understand the magnitude of what they represented to the rest of the universe. The choice remained unmade, but the stakes had never been clearer. Humanity could accept containment and modification, preserving their species but losing their essential nature. They could refuse and face the combined might of galactic civilization, or they could try to prove that Death World species could be partners rather than conquerors, assets rather than threats. The galaxy's greatest fear and greatest hope had the same face, and that face was human.